And we're live. Welcome back
We're
to the Footnote
live.
podcast. This is great. We're back for another great episode. Second week into 2019. Hope you're all having a good New Year. I'm certainly enjoying myself. Yeah, how are you, June?
I'm doing great. It. I think it was a long week,
Mm,
just getting back into the swing of things. But I think I had a lot of. I took time to myself yesterday in Toronto, hanging out with friends, going to a Korean bar. So June is very satisfied right now.
are
I
you?
lost a bit of my voice because I went to karaoke after going to the Korean bar.
Okay. You hungover at all?
Not really. I'm well hydrated and not very hungover.
Good stuff. Yeah, I took. I was at a party yesterday too, and I didn't drink, so
Uh-huh.
I'm like super ready for today.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Paul,
Oh boy.
what kind of footnotes were you thinking about this week?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about. So I saw this comic on Reddit. I don't know if you saw it. It was like reposted onto one of like Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan's Reddit subreddit as well.
Uh-huh.
It's what people think motivation is and what motivation actually is.
Hmm.
So have you seen that comic?
Yeah, you linked
Oh,
it
okay.
on a group chat, so I saw it that way.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I remember now. So the premise is people think motivation is like this, young pretty girl. Okay, from the perspective of the guy, it's like this young, attractive, seductive girl who's like, "Oh, can you do this for me?" Like people think maybe like motivation looks like that, but in reality, motivation is actually this little dude who goes and turns on this giant, massive guy whose name is Discipline, and the Discipline just picks you up, and he says, "You will do it," and that's how like motivation actually works. It's like this the tiny little spark that brings you back into that disciplined routine, and that routine is actually what carries you through to doing things. And so that visualization has actually been really helpful for me. Like it's helpful. It's been helpful this past week in terms of me getting my stuff done. Because I think for the last few years, I've been looking for some sort of passion, some sort of like spark that could really propel me forward and make me want to do things. And then, like this past week, I've just sort of taken a different approach. I've just thought, you know, taking it step by step. Like I always think when I try to get up from my bed, for example, I'm just lying there and I don't want to get up and I don't want to get up. And usually I would just wait for this spark of inspiration to get up. But now I just say, you know what? I'm going to count down from three, and on one, I'm going to get up. And so I just go three, two, one, and I just throw myself up, and that just gets me going through the day. So I guess that's how I decided to actually actualize the visualization that someone made, and yeah, it's been sticking with me. So um, grateful for that, I guess. Grateful for those content creators.
Yeah, so to kind of redescribe the idea, I don't know if it's too clear, maybe to
Hmm.
people who are listening. It's sort of the idea that maybe in the past you would have expected motivation to be this kind of incredible surge of energy that instantaneously motivates you and gets you excited and makes you passionate to do things. Whereas, you know, usually we're not supplied motivation in in those high surges.
Hmm.
It's more like a tiny tick, a suggestion, a kind of little nod
Hmm.
that can provide the spark for kind of different activities. Um, I like that comic didn't resonate like 100% with me. I'm
Hmm.
not sure why. Maybe I frame motivation in a different way. Um, but have you noticed any other way you've been kind of using that framework in your life?
I think I'm like less inclined to look for those big surges of motivation. Like I take what I get. Like I take I take what I can get. So if I even have like a little bit of motivation to do something, I just sort of listen to it. And I guess it's sort of an act of faith to just trust that that motivation is worth following and adhering to. Because sometimes you have these small ideas that come into your mind, and then you're like, no, I don't really want to follow this. Like I don't really want to get up. Like I'd rather just kind of lay here and
Yeah.
enjoy the moment. Like not everyone follows those little signals, right? So I guess
Right.
I've been following that more. And for some reason, like the idea of this huge jack guy like carrying me around for some reason is just so comforting. It's like I have like a spirit animal, and he's like this giant like Arnold Schwarzenegger that's like yeah, trying to get me to do stuff. So yeah, that's the visualization has been good. So I want to ask you too, like well, why didn't it resonate? Like what sort of conflicts were there like with your own, I guess, conceptualization?
Yeah, like, so in the comic, the kind of right way or the better way to conceptualize motivation is it like the work that you do, let's say after being motivated by something, is it seems like it's primarily carried out by discipline, or and I don't think that's entirely true, let's
Mm-hmm.
say. I'm having a hard time thinking of an example. Um, like when you get up in the morning, it's it, it's not necessarily discipline that gets me up, for example. Um, Maybe it's like just the way you've been doing things, and there's a schedule, or like I've developed a habit of reaching for water when I get up in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and then just kind of stumbling over to the shower, and then going to make breakfast. It's like these chains of kind of small events that all link up together, and that kind of propel each other forward, right? So it's going from it's like a domino effect, going from very small domino to like bigger and bigger dominoes, and the
Mm-hmm.
momentum kind of builds as you're doing those kind of things. Um, so yeah, what I didn't like about that comic is maybe uh, it seemed to imply like you're going from the smallest domino, your smallest sense of motivation, to like the biggest domino right away, like um, as as a result of like pure will or pure discipline. Um, yeah, I don't know if that accurately reflects what motivation is like, at least for me, or when I feel motivated to do something. So, like another example is like in the new year, I've been like very motivated and committed on like gaining weight and bulking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about the idea of momentum a lot. So over the break, because I got to eat so much, and I saw that, wow, I can gain something like 15 pounds in 3 weeks. Because I didn't know I could gain weight before. It was always like a struggle, pushing against something that I couldn't break through.
Right.
Now that that was demonstrated to me that it was possible, um, and with the new year and everything, there's all those little factors that kind of pushed me over the edge, that kind of pushed me over that threshold, that made me really want to get into this and keep that positive momentum moving. And so yeah, like I don't think I've ever really taken this seriously, like the idea of bulking and gaining weight and exercising so that that can happen. Um, so just I'm thinking of motivation more in terms of um, the growth of momentum and positive feedback loops. But I do agree with the idea that the initial spark is just tiny. It's a tiny spark. It's up to you how you want to kind of chain it and what kind of positive chain reaction of motivation you want to couple it with.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I've never thought of it as like a rolling event or
Yeah.
like something that builds up. I think maybe the way that I conceptualize it, sort of in the way that you're talking about it, is that huge guy that is disciplined doesn't start off huge, right? Like you kind of build him up as you motivate him more and more. So like he's getting jacked.
Yeah.
He's getting swole as you activate him more and more. So, but I want to talk to you about that the momentum idea, because I don't know if I can't think of any examples in my life where I've felt like one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. Sometimes I feel like or maybe like the time span that I'm thinking about it is wrong. Maybe that momentum builds over like days sometimes or weeks, because I know like over the break I didn't do a lot, and because of that I think I spend a lot of time thinking about, oh man, like what can I do better, like how can I improve, how can I not feel inadequate or feel like I'm useless essentially.
Yeah.
And then when the new year started with med school, like all of those ideas sort of culminated into, okay, I'm gonna get my shit together essentially, right? So that's the only way I could think about it, really.
Yeah, like just to comment on like how difficult it is to build momentum. Like I think there's a lot of things that stop us from building momentum in terms of our motivation and our sense of like well-being. I think motivation is very closely tied to positive emotion, right? So when you are propelled to do something, when you're attracted to something, the reason why you're attracted to do that action is partly because of your dopaminergic circuit, right? That's your reward circuitry. And the theory is that when you do something that is like intrinsically motivational, like approaching food or something, then as you approach it, you get more and more dopamine released, more and more positive emotion generated, until the point that you eat that. And dopamine is also very closely tied to the formation of memory. So as you're approaching and as you're eating that, you are reaching back to all those different moments where you've eaten in the past and had a positive experience. And so you've learned from those experiences that this action, this pathway generates positive emotion and is intrinsically good for you. So it's, motivation is kind of like that positive feedback loop within your dopamine circuitry. So that like tiny bit of dopamine might connect to other memory and emotion pathways that you associate with, and that builds and builds and builds until you motivate enough, you use enough energy to get yourself to your, I don't know, your hamburger or whatever thing that was motivating you. Right. So I really think that motivation and positive feedback loops, that generation of momentum, are very closely tied, like even in the biological sense. The kind of problem I was getting at with I guess the way our societies and things are structured now is that I think there's lots of blockage points, or energy barriers that are so difficult to overcome, or very high cost energy barriers. So one thing that everyone should be motivated to do is to socialize, right? Because we're social beings and we love to socialize and bond and have a sense of belonging. But like to do that, there are immensely high barriers. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. One of them is like culture. If you're talking and like starting a conversation with someone, and you meet a guy on the street and like the first thing, like you're supposed to greet them. What if your ways of greeting each other are different, right? Do you do a handshake? Do you bow? Like, what do you do? And then you start talking, and then maybe the dialect or like accent might be different. The kind of interests, like, and there's so many different interests you can have, like music, sports, what you're studying, intellect, career, like all those variables are kind of up in the air, and there's so much diversity that it's very difficult to find common ground. So that's an energy barrier. The transportation energy barrier, like just getting to and from places because everyone lives so far away from each other, right? So I feel as though there are major blockages in people's motivation systems, that really makes it difficult for people to generate that positive momentum of motivation and positive emotion. So, you know, and I'm always thinking, so what are some ways around that? What are some ways that people have traditionally in the past gotten their, how did people in the past get their social interaction without having to expend that much energy? And I think it was kind of baked into the culture organically, right? So, so for example, like earlier this week, I sold my iPad.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, your old one?
Yeah, my iPad and Apple Pencil, the older one.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking about the idea of exchange and trade, and how like probably before Amazon and big box stores, like you would have markets, right? And then you could go to the market. It would be probably in like walking distance from where you lived, like a local market. You would say, I don't know, you would see someone who like ran that family's farm for the past 3 generations, and you kind of have an idea of who they are, and like your family knows their family. Just go up to them and be like, while you're buying your, I don't know, tomatoes or something, it's like, oh, how's harvest this year? Or how's your family doing? What's your kid up to now? It's like in those kind of small interactions, you can just think of it like just from a materialist perspective. It's just the exchange of goods and services for money, right? No, but it's much more than that. There's a deep social component that's been baked into that. It's kind of, they form a kind of synergy, so that you don't, when you expend the like money or energy to go to the market, you're getting different kinds of rewards, right? You're also getting that emotional, social connection with others in your community. You're also getting the tomatoes, and you know so you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. Nowadays we think we're getting a lot of bang for our buck by siloing and specializing, and I don't know, having all our goods sold at machine, like industrial factories, Costco, Walmart, whatever. But those kind of practices kind of take out the richness of human interactions and other rewards that I think we used to get in more traditional human societies. So like all that is to say is that like the way we've structured our societies is very deeply flawed, in terms of like there are high energy barriers preventing people from finding positive emotion, and things aren't synergizing as well anymore. We're left with a kind of rotting and stale culture. Everyone feels disconnected.
I'm sure a lot of people feel that way as well, right? And I think it's really interesting because maybe the outcomes that we've been looking at are just the wrong ones, right? So society sort of built on efficiency and getting getting the product out there, having people buy things. And so, like, I don't remember, I don't remember the last time I've actually talked to a cashier, you know? Like,
And what would you even talk about?
yeah, exactly, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's such a, like, the way it's set up too is very walled off, right? Like they have their little scanner and the computer in front of them, and then basically what's in front of you is the payment, like the the thing you tap your card on, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's hardly any sort of real interaction with the person standing behind the counter. Um, and the thing is, it serves its purpose, right? The whole point is to get you out of there as quickly as possible so that the next customer can get in line and buy their goods.
Yeah.
And so we completely ignore the other outcome of getting those interactions. I I want to also like go back and bring up another point because you talked about how when you're motivated to do something, you get all this like positive reinforcement. That basically makes up who you are, right? Like the experiences that you have and the positive emotions that you get from them, they inform how you act in the world as you go along, right?
Yes.
As you move forward. Um, and so it seems like the easiest solution would be to get people to have more of those positive experiences in which they're interacting with other people and they're getting positive motivation and positive feedback from it. Um, but I think the other point that you sort of touched upon is we don't have that anymore. Like we don't have those early exposures, those early experiences to sort of prime us to do more of these social interactions when we grow up. Um, and and I do want to give some credit to a lot of families who do try to still keep that up. Um, I think my family in particular hasn't been that great in terms of presenting those opportunities to me because our family is sort of separate from everyone back in Korea, and we didn't really talk with our neighbors. But I think maybe when we become parents, we can try a little harder to have those social interactions and those conversations with other people, and get our kids to actually enjoy that. Um, Although barring like social media, I think is also a huge impediment because it doesn't allow us to focus on um, who we are genuinely. It makes us it shifts the focus to our masks and how we're sort of um, seen by other people. And I think that's why we get this sort of this awkward generation of like you're always worrying about how other people see your mask, that you never really build up your core self.
Mm-hmm.
And so every interaction is different. Every interaction is almost new because the first thing you think of is, oh, how do they perceive me, or how do they see me, instead of, okay, who am I and what can I bring to the table?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking of social media, that's like a big, I would say, primary and the lowest energy what, way to generate positive emotion, right? At least temporary positive emotion.
Mm.
Those likes and shares are the equivalent of I don't know, high fives in real life or something. They're that kind of social validation that and connection that we all seem to be lacking in modern society. Um, so like the reason I connect to this issue so much is because like I've seen different aspects of it in my own life. And like when I learn about broader social scale phenomena, I can make that connection between like my own experiences and those larger picture phenomena. And it's very validating in a way. It says like, yeah, like I'm not the only one who feels this way. Um, the roots of this problem like are not it's not just this, although there's some of this that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a much deeper problem than you can imagine, and it's been in the works for the past, I don't know, 300, 400, 500 years, or maybe forever.
Mm-hmm.
So, the question that we always ask is like, how do we improve things? Where do we go from here? And like I don't want to get to like the parenting and family aspect quite yet. I don't think I'm there yet. But I could comment on it. I went to an event at Mac, and Ken Jeong was the Korean comedian.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said that stuck out to me was that, you know, his father had told him that, you know, but when shit hits the fan, when things are going down, like the first place you turn to is like your family, and that's what your family's there for. That's what family is. And he was telling the story of how his marriage with his Vietnamese wife. She's a doctor. Ken Jeong was also a doctor.
Yep.
Her name is Dr. Ho, which he made a joke of. But his father essentially, after like his experiences with Ken Jeong and his wife and everything, kind of told Ken that, you know, I think, you know, she's a really, you know, great woman for you. She's your family. She's the person you should turn to when shit hits the fan. So, you know, maybe in our day-to-day lives, like we don't recognize like the value of family, or maybe there are like many ways that our families could be better, that it could be better fostering like positive relationships, and you know, but maybe the best sides of family come up during times of crises, right? When so their crises was when Ken Jeong's wife developed breast cancer, like stage 3 breast cancer with like 20% of chance of survival. And she survived. But during those times of crises, like, you know, Ken Jeong was telling the story about how his family really came together, and how his wife and his father and like the people around him really supported him through that process. And it was during that time that he was, you know, filming The Hangover, and like that was kind of about his breakout moment. That was his breakout movie. So I don't know, maybe a lot of the value that we don't recognize in our families and in our lives, like they'll truly show during times of crisis, during times of big change. So that to me kind of speaks to like the importance of having family, of forming family, because, you know, maybe now when you're in your 20s or 30s, you can feel like, oh, I can go on like this forever. I can be free and like without responsibility, and you know, I can be young forever. But, you know, anything can happen at any moment. And if you don't have that, you know, close-knit web of support, then, well, you're just gonna fall through the cracks.
It'll be hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about like social interaction with like strangers and people we exchange goods with, but something we don't often talk about is how we interact with our family, right? And the sort of conversations that we have with our parents.
Yeah.
One of the things that my parents always tell me is like, you can tell us anything, or you should be most comfortable talking to us about anything, like not your friends, not anyone else, but like us.
Yeah.
And I think the idea behind that is like they'll always have my back, or you know, the family is sort of this next level of a relationship where it's not just about how much value we bring to each other. It's that even if you are not being very valuable to me right now, you're still family, and so like I will treat you as such, and I will give you that respect, and I will you can trust in me, that sort of thing. So I think it's very important to build that relationship. I know we had a few conversations about what it means to sort of pay back your parents, or
Mhm.
give back to them what they gave to you. And I honestly, I think I have to have this conversation with more people and people from different cultures, because I honestly don't know what people think is the right amount to give back, or if you should even give back in general. My heart tells me that I have to give back in some way or another. I think the best gift is definitely time. Um, but yeah, like, what do you think about this? What do you think is a good balance of, um, I guess, taking and giving, and actually participating in that exchange, that transfer of goods and services, but not just goods and services, but familial. Um, I don't know, like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah.
what do you think is a good balance of give and take in that case?
I mean, like in Korean culture, it's like there's that whole concept of 용돈, like
Mm,
that spending money.
yeah.
And when you're successful, one of the biggest signs that you've made it is being able to give 용돈 to your parents,
Mm.
that kind of spending money. And so, my mom jokes about it all the time, like, June, you're gonna get me $3,000 a month, right? And I'm like, we'll see. But I like traditionally, I think that's a very common way that um, it's both practical and symbolic and meaningful.
Mm.
When you first, I don't know, text your mom, like, hey, I deposited however much dollars into your account. Like in Korean culture, that's like a sign of so much respect, and that's that's what makes a good son.
Mm.
Um, in terms of exchanging time and I don't know and quality time, like it's difficult with family because when you experience like negative emotions and things in your life that you're not quite expressing, um, like paradoxically, the ones we express or vent our frustrations to is like are the people we're closest to,
Mm.
because that's just easy to take out your anger on, maybe more so than a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think some of the effects of people just living their day-to-day lives and accumulating a lot of baggage, a lot of like tiny paper cuts from their days, and stress, that can creep, and find itself in, let's say, your interactions with your parents. And I know you and I have experienced that to some degrees, and there are
Mm-hmm.
some things that our parents say that pisses us off, and I'm sure there's things we say and the ways we say it that pisses our parents off.
Mm-hmm.
um, so I think I'm going to try to be more mindful, that I don't do that. I think my mom's side of the family especially has a habit of being like very sarcastic, um, and and sometimes that can come across the wrong way for me, or like I feel sensitive to that. um, and I know it's not coming from a bad place. It's like a deeply ingrained habit, a way that it's a kind of coping mechanism, let's say, but not the best one. So, like, can we get around those? Can we have conversations about those kind of little ticks, and blips in our family interactions,
Mm-hmm.
that you know that are preventing that kind of building of positive relationships and momentum? Um, so I, I've just been thinking about that and the little things we do in our interactions.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm curious about too is I feel like in our current culture, we don't really pride ourselves in our family name anymore. Um,
Mhm.
I know, like, in antiquity, or just in the olden days, like, your family name meant so much, right? Like, if you're from the Park family, like, you're super rich, or like you have a lot of like It's almost like royalty kind of idea. But nowadays, like we don't have that sort of family pride, and I don't know how prevalent it is in, I guess, like Western cultures or anything, but I know previously in Asian cultures it used to be a big thing. Um, but yeah, I don't feel that anymore. Like I don't go around saying I'm Paul Lee from
Hmm.
the Lee family, and I don't like wave that around in pride. So I'm wondering if that's sort of been harmful,
Hmm.
um, and has sort of weakened our allegiance to our own families and our social networks there. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
there's like less responsibility to really own up to that kind of name, right?
Hmm.
We're more individualistic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the simplest explanation for that is like we've kind of lost track of our stories, right?
Hmm.
The history and story of our family and our nations, especially for, let's say, second generation, Asian American, Canadian, or any other ethnicity.
Hmm.
Because it's, if you had that, quality time of, positive interactions with your parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, who can all give you parts and pieces of the story of your family story, then you can have a richer sense of who you are, who you came from, what your ancestors were like, just like immediate ancestors, or like, you know,
Hmm.
and what kind of people they were, what kind of circumstances and environments they lived in and overcame, right? Because that's really important to remember. It reminds you that like there's a lot that you are capable of that you
Hmm.
don't even know, um, because that those genes are in you too, and it shows you, it teaches you to be uh, really grateful for what you have and like the position you are in. And fun fact, like for the past 3.5 billion years, every single one of your ancestors has reproduced successfully on this planet. um, I just thought that was, it's an obvious but like crazy fact. And so there's that very, very long story of you, that should inform your identity, and where you want to go. But we just don't know. We're just
Hmm.
not taught. We're not interested. We don't know why it's valuable.
Hmm.
And I'm using "we" very loosely here. It's probably a bad practice.
Right.
But maybe in general among second generation immigrants, you know, I think reconnecting to culture and our histories is
Hmm.
very important. And
Hmm.
having that pride, I wouldn't necessarily call it pride, right? Just you don't need to be prideful in your family name or identity. You just, well, you know that there's, both, strengths and weaknesses in your family.
Hmm.
But things you can be proud of, things maybe not to be so proud of, in your history. But though I think those are all things that really make your experience of life like richer, like the
Hmm.
better you know your identity.
Right. And in in trying to achieve that, I've also been like looking for, I guess, Korean role models, more and
Mhm.
more Korean role models, because I feel like I've been lacking that in my life. And so one of the people that I recently been like fawning over is
Uh-huh.
Jim Young Kim, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So he's the world he's the president of the of the World Bank.
Hmm.
He recently stepped down, actually, like just last week.
I think
Um,
he's the president of Dartmouth, or one of the
the university,
prestigious university in the States.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if he still is.
Hmm.
Um, he was in the past, but now he's like moving on to investing more in the or trying to get more investors in the private sector to help with like a lot of humanitarian projects. But yeah, so Jim Young Kim, like I saw him through Bending the Arc.
Yeah.
So him and Paul Farmer and Ophelia Dahl, they started this sort of organization called Partners in Health, and essentially they brought like vaccines, cheaper vaccines, tuberculosis vaccines to places like Haiti, Peru, Rwanda, and they helped to really lower the burden of HIV/AIDS in these countries as well. But watching that film, I think it wasn't so much the film, but I guess Jim's role in it that really spoke to me. I think somehow like I just felt really connected to this Korean man, right? This Korean like American, which hits close to heart, right? And the vision that he had and the passion that he had is something that I haven't seen in a Korean role model. And so it made me think to myself, you know, this is something I could be. Like,
yeah,
if I saw like some other random like Caucasian person do the same thing, I don't think I'd have the same connection. I would think, oh, they're just another person who's doing these great things. But for some reason, I really connected personally with Jim. I don't know if I should call him Jim, Dr. Kim or whatever. Yeah, so that was a very inspirational moment. So I think there is something to be said about going back to your roots, and you know, it's like a tribal thing, you know.
Yeah.
Like it's a member of your tribe is like this amazing warrior, you know, you feel inspired by him. Yeah, and I felt that like very, very viscerally.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be like very dangerous, right? Like you follow that charismatic tribal leader, and if he is espousing hatred towards other tribes and calling them, you know, lesser, then we know not, you know, that's a sign of a bad leader. But you know, it's true. There's something so viscerally different about that experience. About let's say like when I see Ken Jeong on stage, you know, or when I saw him in Crazy Rich Asians, like I was just watching the movie and I kind of like startled and jumped out of my seat a little bit. I was like, oh my God, this Korean actor that I like is on screen. And I'm like just really happy to see that. Like, you know, you can kind of rationalize all you want and say it shouldn't, that kind of race and ethnicity shouldn't matter. Like people should be judged by their merits, and like we should look up to people based on their character. And like, yes, like absolutely right. But there's also that added component of like the way your body and like your tribal systems react to when you see someone that in the tribal estimation, it's something like that person has access to a similar array of experiences and backgrounds as me, and so thus he or she is like more relatable, closer in the family tree you know, of humanity to me, right? So it's like you know, it's kind of that same response when you see like family you haven't seen for a very long time. It's like, oh my God, like I haven't seen you for a long time, but we're family, and like I recognize that. My body knows that, and it's so strange. There's also, you know, I think a lot of the figures that Koreans respect, you know, a lot of them come from like the kind of Korea's revolutionary like fighters who fought against like Japanese during the Japanese colonial times, and like set up a temporary Korean government in Manchuria, and like there's that whole story that I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but that's so rich of like stories of like just Koreans who really valued freedom and like valued the culture, and really went to great lengths to like to protect it. And Korea has our own Jeanne d'Arc. You know, um,
Joan
I
of Arc.
yeah Joan of Arc, um, and I can't quite remember her name, which is no, I think it's Yu Kyung-sun. I might be a little off, but she essentially, she was 17 years old, and she participated in the protests for like, against Japanese occupation of Korea. She was captured and like brutally tortured like by the Japanese, and she passed away as a result of that. But like to her dying moments, like she was screaming, like the translation is something like freedom for Korea,
Right.
freedom for the Korean people. So like I think if you're interested, those kind of stories that I've always heard about in like my Korean comic books, for young people, like those are very inspirational role models as well. But maybe from like, I don't know, the Japanese perspective, they're just troublemakers and and assassins and bad people. Yeah. I think it's really important to reconnect with some of those role models from like your family, your history, your ancestry.
Man, I wonder. I want to talk to you also about the importance of history, maybe in medicine, or there's a lot of ways in which I feel like history is beneficial to us, and I always find that sometimes I feel strained because I'm trying to create my own history, or I'm trying to create a culture of my own based on sort of what I experience and what I go through.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really look back and read about what actually happened, and then build my conceptual frameworks through that.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I think this connects to medicine is like, what's going to happen in the next few years, um, in terms of how connected people are to their history and how that's going to affect their care, right? Um, so I imagine like at times when people were connected better to their past, um, I feel like it would have been actually easier to provide care because there's at least something, there's like something that's grounding them, and there's something, there's like a system of beliefs that they follow, and it would be easier to interact with people who sort of have this solid foundation. And so maybe like in like psychological care, like for mental health, specifically, like people, I read some paper, I think like people who were um, more religious, or had stronger faith, were able to had better outcomes, like better health outcomes from a certain intervention. And that's because they sort of had this will to move forward and um, to live on, essentially. And I'm wondering if people have that same sort of level of faith and belief and connectedness to their past that will help them to move forward. I think we see that also in like the identity crises that we see going on right now with like gender, and with even like cultural, like some people thinking that they're from that they belong to cultural groups that they weren't necessarily born in, like I think Caucasians thinking that they relate more with Black culture or Asian culture, things like that. Like that sort of like identity um, crisis that yeah, just I don't want to call it disillusionment because I don't want to be offensive in any way, but people are having a difficult time deciding what they belong to and who they are, and I think that's going to lead to worse health outcomes. Like you can't act as um, you can't act as how do I put it? It's harder to live without something to sort of go back on. Um, I don't think that's the best way to put it, but
Right. I mean, I agree. Like, and I think like the literature very strongly supports that case, right? And you look at why there's so much like focus on the transgender community, for example. Like, if you look at the literature, like you'll see consistently that the suicide rates, like mortality rates for that
mhm,
transgender population is consistently higher. And you know, that's partially a reason for, or like LGBTQ, other members of that community. You
mhm,
say like why is that happening? Is it prejudice? Like, yes, like that factors in for sure. But probably a large part of it is also that idea of identity. Like who am I as a person? Like what is my sexuality like? And those are very visceral, deep questions that um, especially if there's not support for that identity like around you, it can be very alienating and like extremely painful, and can cause a lot of suffering, which is
mhm,
why I think a lot of people will choose to take their lives away, like because of that suffering. And so you know and it makes sense from a theoretical perspective. Your like the function of your identity is it's not just some like artsy humanity thing that we construct for ourselves to make ourselves feel better. Like it's literally the basis and like axis of everything we do. It's why why be motivated to pursue medicine over anything else? Like that's baked into our identity. Like let's just take a simple decision, like what do you eat for dinner? Like there's theoretically like a billion things you could eat for dinner. You
mhm.
could not eat. You could eat a blade of grass. You could eat Mexican food. You could eat Korean food. You could, I don't know. There's like,
Yeah.
endless array of decisions. And identity is one of those things that constrains your kind of decisions based on like your previous past experiences. And like if you grew up eating Korean food, you're going to be attracted to Korean food. And like that simplifies your decision, and that gets the ball moving in terms of motivation, as we talked about. Or like who do I associate with? Like what group do I belong to? I grew up in like Christian like background, so maybe I'll go to church. Like a lot of these social structures are failing, but at least if you have that identity, then you can be like that simplifies your decision, and your role. But if that kind of those simplification processes aren't there, then your potential for decisions kind of multiplies infinitely, and you're just lost in a sea of chaos that you have no idea how to navigate. So identity is how you navigate in the world. Your identity and history shapes how you'll move forwards, and what your purpose is. If you don't have that, then you're left purposeless and miserable and
Mhm.
paralyzed by choice. So you know and isolated from everyone. So it's really important, I think, to like reconnect to your story, your identity, and to really foster that, and not what sell yourself short. Um, you don't. I don't think you have to like that. That was one thing for me. Like I think in the past year, I've tried to listen to like a lot more pop music. Like I specifically have a playlist called like Motown, so that I can have a better time when I go to Motown and know like the music that all the kids who like grew up listening to like white music here know.
Right.
And that's helped me like have more integrated times at Motown or other events, but that's not fully my identity.
Mhm.
And so this year I want to try to foster like what is mine and what I do feel connected to, and yeah, and be proud of it, and not feel like I have to be ashamed of it, or that it's weird. I mean, it can be weird. Weirdness is a part of my identity, but I'm not gonna let other people look down on me because of it. If they look down on me, well, I'm gonna say or indicate in some way a big fuck you. Yeah.
I think we've said that in every podcast for the last 5 weeks.
Yeah. Fuck you.
Take a shot every time we say fuck you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and that was sort of my New Year's resolution as well, right? I wanted to be more myself. I wanted to let myself show, and I think you worded it pretty well there. Um, Realizing what I actually connect with, and then fostering that. Uh, I think that's something that everyone should have a go at some point.
Yeah.
And I wonder, because I feel like sometimes people are able to sort of have this already connectedness to begin with. Some people seem very natural with what they like, and what they really love to do, or things like that. Like I feel like some people really have those preferences down. And so I wonder if it is sort of our personality to sort of be more evaluative about what we enjoy, or we're sort of self-conscious in that sense, in the case that we've repressed a lot of the things that we actually enjoy, because we weren't sure if it would be accepted, or if it was the right thing to enjoy.
Yeah.
And now we're sort of getting to a point where we're like, fuck it, I just want to be the best that I can be, and I want to be my best self, sort of thing.
Yeah. I was talking to another, Korean friend that I have in my med class, and he was saying something like, I originally felt guilty about going to bars and socializing with people, but then I realized that if I go and practice socializing, then that'll be good practice for socializing with residents, and getting their advice and things. So it's actually beneficial for my career. So he rationalized socializing and having fun by saying it's helpful for my career. I, that should seem like just so backwards and fucked up, right? But those things aren't good because they're better for your career. No, those things are good because they're just inherently good and fun. The purpose of your working career should be to facilitate those kind of fun experiences, not the other way around. Not I can have fun so that I can have fun with residents so that I can improve my career prospects. That that model of thinking logic is very distorted. So yeah, that's another one of my New Year's resolutions. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do the things that I enjoy and I really like. So the first weekend back, I'll give myself I give myself A minus for my efforts in having fun. Yeah.
What would bring that to an A plus, June?
What would bring that to an A plus?
What are you missing in your life? What's the forbidden fruit? What's the fun that you're afraid to have?
What's the fun that I'm thinking what elevates a dish is the garnish and spices.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like some spice.
All right.
Is what I'll leave it at.
All right. Well put. Well said.
Yeah.
I think that's also a perfect way to end this episode. Hope you all enjoyed. Like June, find ways to add a little spice in your life, garnish your dish,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, be your best self. Catch
Yeah.
you later.
Bye.